For 11,000 years, the galactic consensus has maintained the ultimate cartographic taboo, a spiraling arm of the Milky Way, shrouded in silent, gravitationally scrambled nebulosity, marked on every star chart with a single unequivocal label, "Do not enter." No reason given, no history provided, only a primal, species-wide injunction passed down from the ancient, vanished precursors themselves. Do not approach. Do not scan. Do not acknowledge. Explorers who ignored the warning simply ceased. No debris, no signals, just silence. When the voracious, resource-hungry card or empire newcomers to the consensus scoff at the superstition and dispatch a battle fleet to pierce the nebula, the galaxy watches with morbid fascination. The fleet vanishes the moment it crosses the chaotic gas clouds. 36 standard hours later, a single KR life pod drift back out. Inside, the Empire's finest admiral is found catatonic, clutching a primitive data slate. On it, a single file plays on a loop. Not a warning, not a weapons discharge, but a grainy video of a bipedal creature covered in fur and artificial plumage, violently striking a small white ball with a primitive club, then pumping its fist in the air before a roaring crowd. The file is tagged with 2 words in a previously unknown language, which the consensus linguists urgently translate: human open. The map doesn't say "do not enter" to protect the galaxy from what's inside. It's to protect the galaxy from offending what's inside. And we just track mud all over their front yard. The command nexus of the KR dreadnought star render hummed with predatory anticipation. Admiral Vrax, his chitinous plates gleaming under the harsh lights, studied the holographic map with contempt. The "do not enter" zone shimmered before him, a cosmic stain of caution he was born to erase. Superstition, he rasped, his mandibles clicking. The precursors are dust. Their warnings are the whispers of ghosts, meant to cow the weak. His tactical officers, all sharp edges and gleaming eyes, nodded in unison. The galactic consensus had offered only pleas and cryptic historical data streams about transgressions and quiet things that should not be disturbed. To the KR, who had conquered 3-star systems in as many generations, such talk was the language of the obsolete. The fleet, 12 ships of sleek, angular destruction, pierced the turbulent nebula boundary. Sensors screamed as physics itself seemed to fray. Space-time rippled. Then silence. Absolute, utter silence. The nebula's chaotic gas parted like a curtain, and the star render emerged into clear space on the other side. The view screen filled with a star field, unremarkable at first. But then the long-range scanners resolved the details, and the nexus fell into a silence deeper than the void. It was a graveyard, a parsec-wide shell of dead stars, their light artificially dimmed to a faint, uniform gray. Within this grim shell floated not asteroids, but shattered megastructures, fragments of Dyson spheres, broken ring worlds the size of planetary orbits, and the immense cold carcasses of ships that defied known engineering. Their designs were alien, ancient, and spoke of power that made the KR fleet look like stone tools. This was a dumping ground, a celestial rubbish heap for civilizations that had dared to knock on the wrong door. Before Vrax could order a retreat, space ahead warped. It was not a ship emerging from faster-than-light travel. It was as if reality itself puckered and spat out 3 vessels. They were asymmetrical, covered in what looked like weathered gray-white plating, adorned with stark black symbols, flag and all. They possessed no visible weapons. They simply blocked the path. A communication channel hissed open on a universal emergency frequency. The voice that came through was flat, synthetic, speaking perfect consensus logothic. Unidentified vessels. You have breached the Sol System cordon. You are trespassing in a Class X cultural and historical preservation zone. Power down all non-essential systems and prepare for archival inspection. Vrax barked a laugh, a harsh sound. Preservation zone? This is a junkyard. We are the KR Empire. We do not power down. Identify yourselves. There was a pause. We are the Groundskeeping and Historical Outreach Directorate of Humanity. You are in the front yard. You are tracking ionic residue across the lawn. The absurdity of the statement fueled Vrax's fury. Lawn? You pretend to guard a garden? Move, or be moved. Another pause, longer this time. The synthetic voice returned, its tone unchanged. Request denied. Final advisory. Cease all emissions and power down. Your weapon systems are targeting classified historical debris. This is a violation of Galactic Heritage Site Treaty 12, subsection 3, regarding littering on archaeological assets. Enraged, Vrax gave the order. Littering? Open fire. Annihilate them. The KR-THAR weapons, capable of boiling away atmospheres, flared to life. Lances of plasma and kinetic kill rods crossed the void. They struck the lead human vessel and splashed harmlessly across its hull, dissipating like water on a hot stone. The gray-white plating didn't even scorch. On the human ship, a single, non-threatening light began to blink blue. The synthetic voice returned. Trespass confirmed. Aggression confirmed. Violation of Peaceful Vista statutes confirmed. Initiating standard enforcement protocol. Neighborhood watch. Space around the KR-THAR fleet itched. From behind fragments of broken ring worlds, from the shadows of dead stars, thousands of pinpricks of light awoke. They were drones. Small, simple, and countless. They swarmed like locusts, not firing a single shot. They latched onto the KR-THAR ships with magnetic grips and began to spray them with a dense, rapidly hardening white foam. Panic erupted. The foam-coated sensors clogged thrusters and sealed weapon ports. The Starrender lurched, its engines stuttering as intake vents were filled. Vrax screamed orders, but communications were jammed by a cheerful, repeating audio loop. Please remain calm. A citation is being issued. Your cooperation is appreciated. Please remain calm. Within minutes, the mighty KR-THAR fleet was immobilized, drifting like 12 bizarre, foam-covered sculptures. A single, smaller human craft, bearing the symbol, hammer and wrench, detached from the lead vessel and approached the Starrender. It extended a flexible tube that sealed against the main airlock with a hiss. They weren't being boarded for a fight. They were being boarded for paperwork. The airlock cycled with a mundane thump hiss that was somehow more terrifying than a weapons charge. Admiral Vrax and his honor guard stood ready, pulse rifles humming, mandibles spread wide in threat displays. The door slid open. A human walked in. It was not what they expected. It wore a simple, dark blue one-piece suit with a patch on the shoulder, a stylized planet Earth with a tiny flower and a tool crossed over it. It was bipedal, fleshy, with no natural armor, claws, or fangs. Its face was hairless around the eyes and mouth, which was currently arranged in a small, polite smile that didn't reach its eyes. It held a data slate in one hand. Behind it stood two others of its kind, similarly clad, carrying what looked like bulky scanning devices. Greetings, the lead human said, its voice natural but carrying the same flat efficiency as the ship's AI. I am Compliance Officer Kale. You are in violation of several ordinances. It glanced at the raised weapons. Pointing those at a public servant during a regulatory audit adds a supplementary fine and mandatory cultural sensitivity training. I advise you to lower them. Vrax's second-in-command, Commander Krill, snarled and tightened his grip. Officer Kale sighed, a very human sound of mild inconvenience. He nodded to one of his companions. The other human raised its scanner and pressed a button. A low-frequency pulse washed through the chamber. Every KR-THAR weapon immediately powered down, their energy cells drained to zero in an instant. The rifles were now just expensive clubs. Electromagnetic damping field. Standard issue for dealing with enthusiastic historians, Kale said, making a note on his slate. Now, let's begin. Purpose of unauthorized entry. Vrax, humiliated and seething, took a step forward. We are explorers of the KR-THAR Empire. We claim this territory by right of conquest. Kale blinked slowly. Conquest. Interesting. Not a valid claim modality here. This is a preservation zone, specifically this Sol System front yard and adjacent historical battlefield park. You cannot conquer a museum. It's considered vandalism. He tapped his slate. First violation, unauthorized entry into a controlled cultural vista. Second, operation of high-emission drives in a clean space zone. You've left a smear of radioactive decay across 3 light-years of curated void. Third, attempted weapons discharge on a heritage warden. That's me. As Kale spoke, his companions moved through the Nexus, scanning everything. They took particular interest in the weapon consoles and the drive schematics. What are you doing? Vrax demanded. Inventory assessment for the citation and reparation bill, Kale said matter-of-factly. The foam is biodegradable and will dissolve in 14 standard hours. Your ships will be towed to the system's edge and released. You will be given a fine, a court summons, and a mandatory educational seminar. A seminar? Brax spat the word. On the importance of respecting historical boundaries and the ethical guidelines for first contact with reclusive species, Kale said. It's a 3-day course. There's a multiple-choice test at the end. You'll need a passing grade of 70% for your species to be allowed future petitionary access. The sheer bureaucratic absurdity of it was a weapon the KR had no defense against. Their entire worldview was built on strength, domination, and taking. This was about rules, fines, and learning modules. One of the scanning humans approached Kale, showing him the data slate. Kale's polite smile faded. He looked at Vrax, his eyes now cold. Admiral, a new and severe violation has been logged. Your fleet's aggressive sensor pings upon entry targeted and attempted to scan the third planet of the system. So, it was a world. We scan worlds. That world, Kale said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, is Earth. It is a living history reserve, grade Alpha. Unauthorized scanning of a living history reserve is a direct violation of the precursor human non-disturbance accords. It is the equivalent of pointing a spectroscopic imager at a sovereign being's bedroom window. The penalty is not a fine. For the first time, Vrax felt a tremor of fear that had nothing to do with physical threat. What is the penalty? Kale didn't answer directly. He turned to his team. Seal the record from this point. Initiate quarantine protocol Theta. He looked back at Vrax. Admiral, you and your crew are now under arrest. You will be transported to a holding facility to await judgment. Your empire will be notified of your transgressions. Judgment? By whom? By the relevant authority, Kale said, as the humans began to herd the stunned KR into a group. The Homeowners Association. The KR that our prisoners were transferred not to a warship, but to a large, slow-moving transport that looked like a bloated, friendly whale. Its interior was bafflingly mundane. Soft lighting, neutral-colored walls, seats that conformed uncomfortably to their chitinous forms. A cheerful, recorded voice periodically reminded them of safety procedures and the availability of nutrient paste compatible with most carbon-based metabolisms. Admiral Vrax sat in seething silence, watching a view screen that showed their progress. They were being towed deeper into the system, past the eerie graveyard of dead empires. Further in, the space changed. The stars were bright and clean. They passed a gas giant surrounded by a shimmering, delicate ring system that upon closer inspection was not rock and ice, but trillions of discrete solar collector panels, arranged with artistic precision. A small placard floated in the holographic overlay, Jupiter's solar array and sculpture garden. Please admire from designated lanes. It was all manicured, perfect, and utterly insane. Their destination resolved on the screen. Not a planet, but an asteroid, smoothed and shaped into a perfect cube 1,000 kilometers to a side. On one face, in simple block letters, it read, Directorate of Boundaries, History, and Neighborly Relations, SOL Local Chapter. They were docked with a gentle bump and escorted into the cube. The interior was a vast, open-plan office. Ceilings soared kilometers high. Countless humans in variations of the blue suit moved about or sat at desks, their faces illuminated by holographic displays. The air hummed with quiet conversation and the soft chirping of data streams. Plants grew in orderly rows, water features trickled, and soft, instrumental music played from hidden speakers. Vrax and his senior officers were led to a waiting area with uncomfortable chairs and a table covered in pamphlets. Titles gleamed under the soft light. So, you've breached the cordon, A Beginner's Guide to Galactic Etiquette, The War of the Martian Dust Storms, and, why it's rude to mention it, Quiet Hours, Understanding the Solar System's Noise Ordinance. A young human with a bright, earnest expression approached. I'm Marcy, from Public Outreach. While you wait for your adjudication hearing, would you like to watch an introductory vid? It covers the basics of why the Do Not Enter zone exists. Without waiting for an answer, she tapped a console. A holographic screen flickered to life. It showed stylized animations of ancient starships, bizarre, organic-looking vessels, approaching a young blue Earth. A friendly voiceover began. Long ago, many interesting friends from the stars came to visit, but they were often very noisy, and sometimes they wanted to take things that weren't theirs or change our pretty planet. It caused a lot of mess and stress for early humanity. The animation showed primitive humans looking up in confusion as alien ships dueled in the atmosphere. So, after a particularly big incident involving an attempted parking garage where the Amazon rainforest is now, a very nice group called the Precursors sat down with some of our great-great-great-grandparents. They made a deal. Humanity would get this lovely little spiral arm to ourselves as a front yard where we could grow and play in peace. In return, we promised to keep our toys in the yard and not bother the rest of the neighborhood. The Precursors even put up those nice, quiet nebulas as a fence to keep curious folks from accidentally wandering in and getting hurt by all our old, rusty history. The animation now showed humans and ethereal Precursors shaking hands. Then it cut to images of immense human fleets thousands of years ago, dismantling alien invasions with terrifying efficiency, and then cleaning up the debris, carefully stacking shattered hulls in the graveyard zone. We're a very tidy species, Marcy added proudly. The Precursors love that about us. The vid ended with the friendly symbol of the Directorate, the Earth with a flower and tool. Remember, the voiceover chirped, space is big, but a good neighbor respects boundaries. Let's keep the galaxy tidy together. Vrax felt his mind breaking. This was the horror behind the taboo. A zoning agreement? Enforced by creatures who weaponized bureaucracy and public service announcements? An older human with gray hair and a sterner demeanor arrived. Admiral, the panel is ready for you. They were led into a chamber that resembled a small auditorium. On a raised dais sat 3 humans in slightly more formal versions of the blue suit. The central one, a woman with sharp eyes, spoke. I'm Adjudicator Silva. You are charged with reckless trespass, spatial littering, attempted vandalism of historical artifacts, and invasive scanning of a living history reserve. How do you plead? Vrax drew himself up. I plead the right of sovereign being. Your rules are not universal. We did not agree to them. Adjudicator Silva nodded, as if she'd heard this 1,000 times. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, Admiral. The do not enter marker is the universal notice. The precursor accord is galactic common law. Your empire, as a new species, should have submitted an introductory query via the proper channels. The Squeak Toy Nebula in Quadrant 42 is the designated mailbox. You did not. You kicked down the fence. She tapped her gavel lightly. The penalty for the first 3 charges is a fine, payable in unrefined elemental isotopes, and the mandatory seminar. However, the scanning of Earth is a grave matter. The reserve's sanctity is paramount. It is why we maintain the front yard. The judgment for this is non-negotiable. She leaned forward. One representative of your species must go to Earth. They must explain your actions, face to face, with a resident of the reserve. And they must apologize. A wave of confused relief washed over Vrax. An apology? That was the grave penalty? I will go, Vrax said, contempt returning. He would see this mythical Earth gather intelligence, and... Not you, Admiral, Silva said. You are too aggressive. You're second in command. Commander Krill. The KR, their officer, stiffened. Silva continued. You will be escorted to a pre-cleared location. The encounter will be monitored. Your entire species' future standing hinges on the outcome of this meeting. Dismissed. As they were led away, Vrax finally understood the true nature of their defeat. They were not facing monsters. They were facing adults. And they had just been sent to the principal's office. Commander Krill was prepared for anything. He was prepared for monsters, for god machines, for bio-horrors that birth stars. He was not prepared for Iowa. The transport pod descended through clear, blue skies, landing with a soft thump in a field of tall, green grass that waved in a gentle breeze. The air smelled heavy, of organic life, soil, and something sweet. It was overwhelming. Officer Kale, now acting as his escort, opened the hatch. Stay on the path, he instructed, pointing to a simple dirt track leading toward a cluster of trees. Krill stepped out, his senses reeling. The gravity was a bit light, the sun was a bit yellow. It was all disgustingly pleasant. He followed the path to a small, cleared area by a slow-moving stream. There was a simple wooden chair. Sitting in it was a human. It was old. Its skin was leathered and lined, covered in a simple, checkered cloth shirt and denim trousers. A wide-brimmed hat shaded its eyes. It held a long, thin pole that dangled a line into the water. It did not look up as Krill approached, the grass crunching under his hard feet. Sit, the old human said, its voice a dry rustle. "You're scaring the fish." Krill, a commander of a star armada, slowly lowered himself onto a large rock beside the chair. He stared at the human. It possessed no visible technology, no armor, no aura of power. It was just a biological entity, aging and frail. "I am Commander Krill of the Kaardar Empire," he began, his voice automatically modulating to a threat growl. "I know who you are," the old man said, still watching his line. "Name's Joe. They told me you folks took a picture of my house." Krill's mandibles worked. "A picture? Scan. Same thing. Rude." Joe finally turned his head. His eyes were a faded blue, but they held a depth that made Krill instinctively want to look away. "Why'd you do that?" "It is standard procedure. To assess threats. To find weaknesses. To prepare for conquest." The words sounded stupid here, in the buzzing quiet of the meadow. Joe chuckled, a sound like gravel shifting. "Conquest. Heard that one before. Usually from folks who end up as lawn ornaments out past Jupiter." He reeled his line in slightly. "See that stream? Been here 10,000 years. My family's lived here for 300. That hill over yonder? My great-great-granddaughter is going to be buried there someday. You understand?" Krill did not. "It is a land feature. It's history," Joe said, his tone firming. "It's continuity. You all come blazing in with your standard procedures, but you don't ask. You don't wonder if maybe, just maybe, somebody lives here. That maybe their story isn't finished being written, and you've got no right to scribble in the margins." "The galaxy belongs to the strong," Krill recited, a core tenet of his being. "The galaxy belongs to itself," Joe corrected softly. "Strength ain't about who's got the biggest gun. It's about being there tomorrow, and the day after. It's about having a place to call your own, and the will to keep it that way. We made a promise a long time ago, to tend our own garden. That nebula fence ain't to keep you out. It's to give you a polite way to not get hurt by the tools we use to do our tending." He finally looked directly at Krill, and the commander felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. In those old eyes, he didn't see the fury of a warrior. He saw the patient, immovable certainty of a mountain, the quiet judgment of something that had seen empires of stars rise and fall, and had simply kept fishing. "Your people are new to the neighborhood," Joe said. "That's okay. New folks can be welcome. But you gotta learn the rules. First rule is, you don't point things at another man's home. You understand me?" The question hung in the sweet air. It was not a request. It was an ultimatum from the very soil itself. Krill, for the first time in his life, felt not just defeated, but inconsequential. His empire, his fleets, his conquests, they were a fleeting noise in the long, quiet afternoon of this old man's world. The true power here was not in explosion, but in endurance. Not in taking, but in staying. "I understand," Krill heard himself say, the threat growl entirely gone from his voice. "Good," Joe said, and turned back to his fishing. "Apology accepted. Now sit quiet. You might learn something about patience." And Commander Krill, conqueror of worlds, sat on a rock by a stream on Earth, and learned about silence. Back on the bureaucratic cube asteroid, Admiral Vrax awaited Krill's return with a simmering mix of dread and dwindling defiance. The humans had provided him with data slates containing the full, unedited history of the front yard. He had scrolled through millennia of logs, not of wars, but of enforcement actions. He saw the Varaxi swarm, who tried to strip mine Mars for its iron oxide. They were subdued not by missiles, but by a swarm of terraforming drones that simply redeposited every gram of dust back where it belonged, then presented the Varaxi with a bill for landscape recontouring and a community service sentence reseeding Martian lichen. He read of the celestial aesthetic, who tried to improve the sun's output by installing a reflective Dyson net. They were foiled by the Solar Energy Regulatory Board for unauthorized modification of a public utility and creating a glare hazard for local navigation. Every invasion was met not with glorious battle, but with the infuriating, meticulous, and utterly unassailable logic of bylaws, zoning permits, and civic codes. Humanity didn't fight for survival. They complained for peace. And their complaints came with the force of natural law. Krill returned. He was unharmed, physically, but something in his stance was different. The arrogant tilt of his carapace was gone. He moved slowly, as if the quiet of Earth still clung to him. "Well," Vrax demanded in their private holding cell, Krill looked at him, his compound eyes reflecting a newfound, weary wisdom. They are not what we thought, Admiral. Their strength, it is not a weapon you can face. It is a fact you must accept, like gravity, or time. He described the old human Joe. He described the stream, the hill, the sense of deep, rooted time. He wasn't afraid of us. He was disappointed. Like we were children trampling a flower bed he'd spent 10,000 years cultivating. Before Vrax could muster a scathing reply, Adjudicator Silva entered, holding a final judgment slate. Your officer has completed the apology. The Earth resident has accepted. Therefore, the most severe charge is mitigated. She handed the slate to Vrax. On it was a list, a reparations bill. The tonnage of isotopes required was staggering, but it was itemized with maddening precision. Cost of nebula scrambler recalibration after ionic smear, hazard pay for groundskeeping directorate response team, fee for mandatory Galactic Neighbors seminar enrollment per attendee, carbon offset credit for transport to O from Earth 1 passenger. This is an outrage. Vrax hissed. We will not pay this. You will, Silva said calmly. Your ships will be released. One will be left with you, its drive attuned to a crawl, so you can return home. The rest will be held as collateral until payment is received. A payment plan can be arranged with our finance department. There is, of course, interest. She leaned closer. This is your species 1 and only warning, Admiral. The do not enter sign is not a challenge. It is the galaxy's most polite beware of dog sign. The dog is friendly if you follow the rules. It has been trained not to bite. It fetches. It rolls over. But its sole purpose for 11,000 years has been to guard the house. And it is very good at its job. The message was clear. Humanity was the guard dog. The front yard was its territory. The rest of the galaxy lived in the house next door, a house humanity had politely promised not to bother, so long as no one threw rocks over the fence. Vrax and the remnants of his crew were deposited back on their least powerful ship, its weapons permanently disabled, its drive now slower than light. As they limped away from the manicured hell of the Sol system, they passed the graveyard of dead empires one last time. Vrax now saw it not as a warning of human violence, but as a testament to human tidiness. Every shattered hull was a piece of litter they'd picked up and put in its place. The final communication from the Directorate played on a loop as they crossed back through the nebula fence. Thank you for visiting the Sol System front yard and adjacent historical battlefield park. Please remember to submit all future inquiries via the proper channels. Have a pleasant galactic cycle. And remember, it's a big universe. Let's keep it nice for everyone. Back in the galactic consensus, panic had erupted when the KR-Thar fleet vanished. When Vrax's lone, crippled ship emerged, dragging its shame, the story exploded across the networks. Not a story of heroic defeat, but of humiliating, baffling correction. The KR-Thar empire, its talons clipped by bureaucracy and its pride shattered by a fishing lesson, quietly began paying its fines. The first shipment of isotopes was delivered to a small, unmarked depot near Jupiter. And on a certain star chart in the consensus archives, the Do Not Enter zone received a small, clarifying footnote, added after millennia. It read,